Welcome everybody to the Chess Lab. Welcome to episode 10 of how to reassess your chess. I'm recording this almost back to back to episode 9. So I remember very well what we did. We went over bishop versus knights and we went on a deep dive on this dynamic of these two pieces. And we reached the tests. So let's go with test 17, which is the first of this chapter. Of course, the counting keeps going. Okay, let's go. Let's go, guys. Let's go. So, this is puzzle, and these are level 19, 20, 200. So, we're just going to go over the puzzles, not like too fast, but also we go through them, because I just wanna keep moving with this book. So, let's evaluate the position. 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. So, material is equal. Let's look at the pawns. So there are some differences. There is a 3 against 2 on the queen side. There is a 2 against 0 on the king side. A 4 against 3 in the center. A 4 against 3 on the king side, but black cannot really utilize this. Black has slightly worse pawn structure. However, well, there are imbalances. We'll get them later. This pawn gives them some more space on the king side. We have more space in the center. Weaknesses. They have the f5 pawn, which is weak, and that's pretty much it. We don't have pawn weaknesses, so that's good. Pawn breaks. Pawn breaks, we may go for b4, b5, some sort of a minority attack. They may go for c5, trying to break our center. They may go for f4, but I see it very unlikely, so perhaps we have b4, b5. They have c5, perhaps. So there's that. What else? Space we talked about. Okay, so minor pieces. There is a major imbalances, which is black has the bishop pair. We don't. So knight f6 stands decent. Is not bad at all. The knight on e2 also stands decent, but can be improved. The knight on c4 stands quite well. The bishop on c7 stands decent. He's not super active, but he's not super useful, I should say, but he's active. He's looking at diagonals. Our bishop on g2 looks decent. Again, b4, b5, maybe an idea, right? Okay. When it comes to the minor pieces, though, we can say something else as well, which is the knights don't work too well together. This is something that Sinman said, so perhaps if we can trade them for one of their pieces is good. So the move that comes to my mind is knight to f4. But let's try to go a little bit deeper in this position. Let's look at the heavy pieces. The queens, our queen is perhaps slightly better positioned because it's pressuring f5 and is already developed. He's also looking at the c6 pawn, which is very well guarded right now, but again, you never know. So, outpost and stuff like this. Well, there is the e5 square, which we could go into. There is c5 square. There is f4 square. They have e4 square, g4 square, d5 square. What else? Semi-open C file, semi-open D file, and E file. Okay. All right. Heavy pieces, again, we talked about the queens. The rooks, I feel like our rooks are slightly better simply because they are connected. They need to move the queen first. So I would say that our pieces are slightly better positioned, but we have the problem that they have the bishop pair and we have the 2 knights, so perhaps we want to trade one of our knights for one of their bishops. Again, a move that comes to mind is knight f4, and so that's a candidate move perhaps. Now, what else? What else can we say? Sorry, but I have to take my points. When it comes to the evaluation. Armageddon thinking, sure. Checks, captures, attacks. Well, they can play bishop takes c4, queen takes c4, and I don't see the problem. There are no checks, there are no threat of mates. Capture, we went over it. Attacks, I mean, they can play b5, but this weakens tremendously c6. And after knight to e5, they are in big trouble. So, or even knight to d2 or something, I don't know. Or knight a3, I have no idea. But okay, in general, I don't see much. From our point of view, again, we can threaten, but his position on knight f4 to take their bishop pair. So okay, I would say that there's nothing urgent though. So let's think about potential moves. So first of all, bishop pair, right? We may want to play knight f4 to equalize us, you know. Because, okay, their bishop on e6, though, we didn't quite analyze it. The bishop on e6, is e6 a good bishop? I mean, it ensures some pressure. Perhaps bishop d5 is an idea of them, because if we take, that's not good, and if they take, then we are left with two knights, which again, we said they don't work too well together, and they prevent our bishop from being strong. So if we play b4, for example, a move like bishop d5, this is only an example, it may be completely ridiculous to play this move, but, you know, kind of shuts down our hopes a little bit. Although we will win this pawn. So it's not so simple, but perhaps they can play g6, but then things get complicated. So yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated position. So b4 perhaps is a candidate move. Rook f to d1 is a candidate move. But also knight f4. I think knight f4 is perhaps more urgent because the knight is not optimal on e2. Now knight c3, first of all, it hangs this knight, so that's obviously a blunder, but let's assume he didn't blunder the knight. I don't know what the future of this knight will be. You know, perhaps to reach this square, maybe. Another candidate move is knight to e5. Which now allows knight c3, with the idea of perhaps reaching c5, counting on the fact that every time you play b6, you're weakening these diagonals tremendously. So maybe knight to e5 is a move, you know, perhaps even with the idea of rerouting here. But knight to e5, I don't know necessarily if this is really good. I don't know, maybe it's good though, maybe it's good. But yeah, knight to f4 really grabs my attention. Now they can go back with the bishop, but then I have knight e5, and all of a sudden my knight looks very active. And if they go all the way back to c8, well, I mean, I can also go to d3 then. Oh, I can do this if they don't take me, and then reach the e5 square, which would be very nice. Okay. So knight f4, what can happen? Bishop takes, of course you have to calculate. So knight f4, bishop takes, g takes. Doesn't look too bad for me. Anytime they jump with their knight forward, I can always play f3. Then e3 becomes weak though. But okay, so I'm gonna play knight f4. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It's wrong. Okay, knight e5 indeed was correct. So I'm gonna read the comment here. Heading for d3 and then to c5. Okay. Trying to get the e2 knight to c5 isn't as effective. So for example, knight c1, bishop d5. Oh, but bishop d5 is a move then. Knight to d3, bishop takes, king takes, queen d5 check, king g1, and knight e4 is also fine for black. Note that knight e5, which is this move here, in comparison to knight c1, takes the knight off the threatened c4 square. This means that knight c1 allows bishop d5 because the f5 pawn cannot be taken. Ah, because it will drop the knight. But knight e5, bishop d5 isn't playable since queen takes f5 picks up a free pawn. Of course, keeping the knight on e2 has the added benefit that a well-timed knight f4 is still on the table. So knight e5. Okay, then they play knight to d5 here. And knight to d5 tries perhaps to go to b4. So this move really makes a lot of sense. Okay, they play g6, and now we're going to go knight c5. Okay. So this was interesting. I considered it, but I wouldn't have chose it. So knight e5, we read all this, and that's pretty much it. Okay. Okay. So let's go to the explanation. This is the game McDonald Neil against Lukacs Peter. Lukacs. So d4, knight f6, bishop g5, d5, bishop takes, pawn takes, e3, c6, knight d2, bishop to d6, g3, putting the pawns on dark squares after giving up the dark square bishop, that's logical. Castle bishop g2, f5, knight to e2, knight to d7, castle knight f6, c4, d takes, knight takes, bishop c7, queen c2, bishop to e6. And here we are. Black has double f pawns. Yes, this isn't the end of the world, but it does make his position rather inflexible. White's pawn on d4 gives him a central and queenside space advantage. Okay. In fact, the half-open c5, the c4 knight controls over c5, and the control over c5, and White's light square bishop will make it clear that this is the area where White should try and make some inroads. Other than pawn structure considerations, the main imbalance is Black's two bishops versus White's bishop and knight. Exactly. However, the structure plays a role here too, since the pawns are severely limiting the bishop's activity. So the two main bits of information White needs to concentrate on is seek queenside play, an eventual minority attack with b4, b5, optimize your knights. Optimizing the knights means bringing one or both of them to an advanced post where they can influence the upcoming queenside battle. Remember that your whole army has to work for the same goal. Thus, the c5 square suggests itself. Once there, it will hit b7, and if it's chased away by b6, b7, b6, the c6 pawn, which will be sitting on an open file, will be quite weak. I'm happy because I noticed all these things, but I ended up playing the wrong move, because I thought the main thing to do was to improve the e2 knight, which was on a second rank, so that's interesting. Because the pawn structure favors White, and because the knights are better suited to this structure, White will retain a small but annoying edge for some time to come. Explaining the rating spread. This is far from easy because White not only has to be able to get his knight to c5, but he also has to be aware of the minority attack. On top of that is the question about bishop takes e5 after White's knight e5. In my view, that's too much to take into account for anyone below 1900, but I would love if lots of readers prove me wrong. Yeah, quite frankly, I mean, I saw knight e5. Why didn't I like it? I don't know. Perhaps of bishop d5. I didn't like bishop d5 there. But then you can take f5, so interesting. So knight e5, heading to d3 and then to c5. Trying to get the e2 knight to c5 isn't as effective. So for example, knight f4, takes, bishop d5, offers equal chances, but I thought that was we were going for. So I misevaluated. I thought their bishop pair was strong, but in reality the structure makes the bishop pair not so strong. So that perhaps was my mistake. So instead, knight c1, bishop d5, knight d3. This is good for black. Okay, we read that comment. So knight d5. If bishop takes e5, d takes c5 leads to some surprisingly complex positions that give White a bordersome initiative. For example, knight d7. Knight d5 is possible, but it doesn't put any pressure on e5 and thus gives White a free hand. Queen c3. Oh, so that was one mover. So knight d7, queen c3, queen to b8, which keeps attacking the pawn. If queen c7, there is f4, and the black queen is not well placed. So f4 now, anyways. F6, trying to disrupt this structure. Knight to d4, which threatens the bishop. Queen e8 defends the bishop, otherwise you will lose f5. Now rook d1. F takes is a little better for White, since knight takes, there is e4. Interesting. And if f takes e4, there is rook check. If they take with the queen, they lose the bishop, so they have to do this. But now check, and they lose material. Now, after knight d7, knight takes d7. Knight takes e6 is an interesting but dubious decision. Takes. Rook c8, d5, bishop to e5. On knight b8, there is bishop b7, bishop takes d5, takes, rook h1, knight c6. Also black has a small edge, but after bishop e5, d takes, knight here, rook here, queen takes f5, knight here, pawn check, queen takes f7, rook takes f7, when black extra piece has to be more important than white's 3 pawns. Another option is queen takes, knight c1. Both these and knight d3 leave white with all the play thanks to the factor mentioned earlier. So this is the extra analysis he mentioned. So knight d3, rook a to d8, b4. Knight e to f4 is also good. Bishop d6, rook to b1, and as usual, white's fourth choice. Okay. So many variations. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of many variations. I think they're just confusing. But this is me. But this is in general. Knight d5. So knight d3, g6, knight c5, bishop c8, knight to c3, knight f6, and here it starts. With his thematic minority attack in motion, white soon took over the queen set and scored an instructive win. a6, a4, bishop d6, b5, a takes, rook takes, queen to c7. If you take on b5, I mean, I guess knight takes b7 is good, but also knight takes b5. Queen c7, b takes, queen a4 attacking c6, knight to c5, knight a6 though, bishop takes, queen takes. On c5, I think there is like knight b5 or something, knight b8, queen c5, h5, knight to a4, h4, knight to c5, h takes, rook c8, rook to b1, threatening rook b7, maybe. So queen e7, rook to b7, queen e8, e4, bishop takes, d takes, and I guess that after f takes, bishop takes, yes. Threatening bishop takes g6. I suspect time trouble was at work here, simply bishop h3, which attacks the rook. Rook d8, rook takes f7 was decisive. Ah, because if queen takes, there is bishop e6, okay. Bishop e4, knight to d7. If bishop takes g6, maybe knight c5, even don't know. If bishop takes g6, maybe knight e5, but I'm not sure. Knight e5, queen here, rook there, rook c7, queen here, king there, rook d7, check. Threatening queen h1, nasty. Attacks the other rook, takes, queen h5 check, wins the knight because the pawn spinned. Okay, nice game. Test 18, but is informational, so. Oh, level 2000 on up. In this position, white tried bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, e4, giving black the two bishops, but closing the game so they will be ineffective. Was this a wise decision? Wow. Wow. That's crazy. So let's evaluate this position. So if I click here, oh, I can click here. So if I do this, I can click here and it goes back. Okay, perfect. So, let's look at this position. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. We are up a pawn. We are up a pawn. Interesting. So, pawn structure is symmetrical, except we are up a pawn, which is the b pawn. Pawn breaks for us are like b4 and d4 maybe. For them is like f5, I don't know, and f4. When it comes to the minor pieces, our bishop looks like a good bishop. Their knight doesn't look like a good knight, but knight a5 can improve very fast the position of this knight with knight b3. So knight a5, knight b3 can be a thing. What else? The bishops, our bishop on c1 is not looking that good. Their bishop on c7 also is quite terrible. Their light square bishop is just there. Our knight on g4 is like, sorry, on g3 is okay, I guess. And we have to castle, the rooks are better. So bishop takes, and e4. I mean, I don't know if I dislike this too much. However, what happened after f5? After f5, what happens? f5, knight takes f5, because on pawn takes f5, there is bishop takes g2. Their bishop looks extremely good. So f5 looks good, knight takes f5, queen takes e4 check. Queen takes and bishop takes. No, that doesn't look good. I think f5 is good for them. f5 there is f3 though, but then there is f4. So f5 here is a good move. And we are underdeveloped and they're ready to attack. No, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I think we should have just castled. And on knight a5, perhaps bishop d1. And trying to engineer some b3, bishop b2. No, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. But let's see. Maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm completely off. Let's see. I'm happy because it was a little bit cold. Now I'm warming myself. Let's see what Howard Stoughton against Johann Jakob Lowenthal. So this is, I think, a classic game. A classic. So c4. So my answer is no, it's not a good idea because black has f5 and is strong. So knight c3, knight f6, e3, bishop to b4, queen b3, c5, knight to d5, knight to c6, knight e2, d6, knight g3, bishop to e6, a3, bishop a5, queen takes b7, bishop d7, queen b3, castle, knight takes f6, queen takes f6, bishop to e2, queen to h4, bishop to f3, rook to b8, queen to d3, and now bishop to c7. So, that's the position. If we flip it, that's the position, right? Where bishop takes was played. Okay, or something. Bishop c7. Okay. White's a pawn up, but black has a lead in development and would have enjoyed good compensation after the pedestrian castle, f5, bishop d5, king h8. However, here Stoughton had a sudden inspiration. Why not add a superior minor piece to his extra pawn? And so the sequence bishop takes, e4 came into existence. This would be great if White had the time to play castle, queen e2, d3, and f2, f4. However, black isn't going to sit back and accept a close position and inferior bishops. Explaining the rating spread. Another hard problem. I think players under expert would have trouble evaluating this. After all, black's down a pawn, and it does indeed look like black bishops are dead in the water. To get beyond some easy misconceptions in this position, one needs a solid grasp of statics versus dynamics, explore in detail in part 6, and an advanced eye for tactics. After bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and e4, there is f5, which is what I said exactly. This rips open the position and, in doing so, shatters white's illusion. The lesson here is clear. If you are going to give your opponent two bishops, be absolutely certain that he can't open things up. Conversely, if you have the two bishops and they seem dead, insist on finding a way to bring them to life. The concept of mental toughness, pushing your own agenda, can be found in part 4. So as you can see, there are extremely important things like static versus dynamics and pushing your own agenda that are going to be explored in depth in next parts. Now, before keep moving, I want to see like what's the rating spread here, level 2000 and up. So this was considered difficult, and I managed to solve it. I'm happy. Okay. My apologies. Castle. This is not white. What white wanted to play, but he suddenly realized that knight takes f5 failed to bishop takes e4, knight takes h4, on queen to g3, queen takes g3, knight takes g3, bishop takes g2, rook g1, bishop g6, followed by rook f3 with doubling up. He's crashing since finding any reasonable moves for white will prove more than a little difficult. And after knight takes h4, simply bishop takes d3 when white position is hopelessly lost. Notice how black's light square bishop puts the knight to shame. Yeah. Of course, trying to hunker down with f3 loses a piece to f4, which I noticed, yeah. So castle. And now f takes e4. This simple capture leaves black with a clear advantage. Material is now even, but all of the black's pieces are superior to their white counterparts. Lowenthal managed to eventually win, though he seemed to try hard to botch it. Okay. Queen c2, rook to f4, b3, rook b to f8, bishop to b2, rook to f6, rook a to e1, rook h6, h3, and here rook h to f6. However, e3, with the idea of sacrificing bishop takes g2, would have been very strong. But rook h to f6 was played. E3 is very instructive also to activate the bishop, and here the game just kept going. So I'm gonna go quite fast here. Nice tactic. Of course, you cannot take because the king would hang, so you can do that. Knight g3, rook takes, queen takes. And as you can see, perhaps you may argue Lowenthal wasn't that playing that well, but the fact that he had such superior position allowed him to still perform well. Okay, here he almost blunders g7, but you know he doesn't almost blunder, but it's like, you know, there's some tactics. Queen here. So as you can see, it's a tricky situation. Some tactics perhaps. Wow. And in the end, the game was resigned by Stoughton, which is upper rook. I mean, Lowenthal's upper rook. Okay, very nice. So I solved that. Let's look at this new position. So 3-4, 3-4. materials equal. There is a 3 against 2 on the queen side, 1 against 2 on the king side, and 3 against 3 on the king side. We have more space in the center and on the king side. Pawn breaks are for us f4 perhaps. f4 looks very interesting now that I'm looking at it. And what else? What else? Yeah, what else? Well, let's look at the minor pieces, right? So we have a knight on d5, which looks fantastic. They have a knight on c5 that looks fantastic. And our bishop on b3 is a good bishop. Their bishop on e6 is a good bishop. Their bishop on d8 is not exactly what I would consider some sort of a genius, you know? No, I don't want to be offensive, but that bishop right there is a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Okay. If you know what I'm saying. So, our rook on d3 is decent, I guess. Our rook on h1 is also decent. The rooks and their bishop is a little bit uncoordinated. So, yeah. I would say we have the more active pieces, but there is an issue. There is a big issue, guys, which is our... there is an immediate threat to our rook on d3. They are threatening knight takes d3. And then to perhaps bring a rook on the c file, take on b3, terrible pawn structure. Well, take on b3, no, I just invented that, but you know what I mean. Okay, so what can we do? Of course, the first move that comes to mind is bishop takes c5. Gives up the bishop pair, but after bishop takes c5, d takes c5, we can play c4, believe it or not. Keeps the position a little bit close. This incentivizes b5, which I guess can still be played, but is less effective. And keeps our knight on d5 a monster. And if they ever take it, we take back with, let's say, the c pawn, let's say, unless they play b5, then that would be a fork. And we would have a protected pass pawn. So bishop takes c5 looks quite interesting. We can also try to target e5 somehow, not sure how though. Okay, so in this position I'm gonna take the knight. If it's wrong, it's okay. That's right. Okay, now, the puzzle's not over. The puzzle's not over, this is important. Because here we have to find some good moves. So a move is f4. f4 is a move. They take, I take, and they can play c4. I take, but they take like this. So I don't like f4. I don't like f4. It also opens the position. Those bishops perhaps becomes alive. So there is b5, which is a move. I would like to play c4 to consolidate that. And our bishop looks like a big pawn then. However, we're also threatening a4. So they may play b5, like they may have to, but then we play a4 ourselves. If they take, we take, and it feels like we have good blockade on the light square, we can play b3 and have a fantastic position. And after this, if they take, we take, and all of a sudden we have very good position. So I'm going to play c4. And it's incorrect. Knight to e3. I consider knight e3. I consider knight e3. But for some reason I didn't like it. Why? I don't know. But I considered it. But what was my idea though? Perhaps to take and they take with the pawn, but then I have g4. And here I will take with the... I'm gonna take with the a pawn, taking towards the center. Okay, now it's time to evaluate. Very interesting. So bishop takes, pawn takes, knight e3, bishop takes. Swapping a pair of bishops, thus depriving black of his two bishops. And leaving all the light squares in the hands of the knight. Okay, a takes. White, who has a flexible knight, it can leap into c4, d5, f5, or g4 at a moment's notice. And ownership of the open d file is a clear advantage. Of course, an advantage doesn't mean you'll win, as evidenced by the remainder of this mistake-filled game. Okay, so the game's gonna be a mess. So we have Varga Zoltan against Bakre Tejas. Okay, so for c5, that's Sicilian. And it's a game of chess. It's a game of chess. What can you say? What can you say rather than it's a game of chess? So, knight c5. One might think that the position is all about the weakness of the d6 pawn, but that would be incorrect. Instead, I'm looking for a pure minor piece mentality. Explaining the rating spread. The section is on minor piece battles, so any answer should have something to do with that. And there's no cleaner minor piece battle than a bishop versus a knight. I know that this is something players in the indicated rating spread can fully understand, now or within a bit more training. White should play for the superior minor piece. Great knight versus poor bishop. Yeah, I kind of missed that, quite frankly. I kind of missed that, because here, what did I do? What was my move here? c4, because I got scared of like b5. I should have played knight e3 instead. If b5, I just take the bishop. Yeah. Okay. Knight e3, bishop takes. Swapping a pair of bishops, thus depriving black of his two bishops and leaving the light squares in the hands of knights. Yeah. A takes, and we already read this comment. So f6 now, and here rook to d7. Rook to g1 prevents any counterplay and keeps a firm grip on the game. So this game is not perfect. F takes, better was rook e7, rook h2 d1, rook takes, f takes, h5, when white, whose rook and knight are far superior to their black counterparts, still has a solid plus, even though he's a pawn down. So f takes, knight to f5, threatens rook g7 check, bishop f6 defense, rook g1, that's a mistake, should have placed h takes, and after bishop takes g5, there is f4. What the hell? And after bishop takes f4, king b1, g6, because on king h8, rook takes g7, h6, rook takes b7 is better, but still very much in white's favor, but g6, rook g7 check, king f8, rook h takes h7, threatening mate on h8, g takes f5, e takes f5 with the idea of f6 followed by rook h8 mate. That's some brutal shit. But okay, rook g1, h6, rook takes b7, again, h takes, bishop takes, king b1, would have maintained a significant edge. But okay, here there are many mistakes. Rook a to b8, rook c7, takes, knight takes g7, bishop g5 check, king to d1. Now white's advantage is gone. However, king b1, rook e to c8, rook d1, rook to d8, takes, knight e6, rook d2, knight takes g5, check, king f7, also petered out to a draw. Now this is check, h3, knight e6, h2, rook h1, rook to d2, interesting, rook g7 check. What if you play knight takes? Knight takes, there is perhaps rook g2. So rook g7, knight takes g5, losing. You could have drawn by rook h7 check, king to g8. What happened? Oh, if you take h7, g5 lose with check, so you take on d2 and then you take on h2. Interesting. So check. Funny how that line is not shown. Okay, now it's shown. and is good for white. The rest of the game must have been painful for white. So knight takes g5, rook takes c2, threatening all sort of shenanigans. Rook h7, rook takes, check, king f2, takes, damn. Rook g6, king here, king takes, 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 damn. Rook h1 also, and stings immediately, but, you know, they push their pawns. And this is game over now. If you take with a king, you're not threatening mate, so c2, c1 wins, and if you take with a rook, you're not threatening mate either. Yeah. So, interesting. Let's try to solve this. So, 3, 4, 3, 4, materials equal, 3 against 2 on the queen side, 1 against 2 on the king side. Okay, so there are no major imbalances here. Pawn breaks, d5 for black perhaps, and b5. What else? Weaknesses, open files. There is a semi-open file on the d5, there is a weak square on e5, a weak pawn on d6. We have a perhaps slightly loose square on d4 and f4, but mainly they have problems. So there's that. Minor pieces. Our knight on c3, I would say, is better than the knight on d7. Our knight on f3 is a little bit worse, maybe, than the knight on f6, because the knight on f6 is controlling d5 even. Our bishop on c1 seems better than the bishop on e7, but not really. It's an illusion, because the bishop on e7, if it wasn't there, we would probably win d6. So there's that. So what do? We want to win control of the d5 square, in my opinion. That's the critical thing. So my move would be bishop to g5, with the idea of taking, because both of these knights can look at this square, you know. So if we take one of the knights, which usually looks good, we would have superior knight against bishop. For example, here, h6, let's say, takes, knight here, knight takes, rook takes, and we keep this square. We can always move a knight here. We can go knight h2, knight f1, knight here in the future. You know? Perhaps there are other ways to get there. I don't know. There are maybe other avenues, even here. You know? So yeah, I like bishop to g5 idea to get a hold on this square. Now I would love to take. Think I'm gonna do it. No? Oh, that's crazy. Knight h2, it's important that you appreciate how this maneuver turns a once lazy knight into an active participant in the battle for d5. Wow, that's cool. Let's look at this. So, bishop g5. White plays directly for a superior knight versus bishop position, which I've identified, which will also create a permanent grip on d5. This move is both thematic and easy to understand. Black's knights are the guardians of d5. While white's bishop will never be able to directly affect that square. Exactly. Thus, white wants to swap off both black's knights, leaving him with a dark square bishop, ideally, a white knight lording over the board on d5. So, rook f8, knight h2. It's important that you appreciate how this maneuver turns a once lazy knight into an active participant in the battle for d5. This is very, very instructive. So let's look at the game. This is Amonatov Farouk against Zablotsky Sergei. So e4, d6, d4, knight f6. Oh, I thought this was like a Sveshnikov or something, but turns out I'm a little bit of a silly hat sometimes. e4, c6, bishop a2, b6, queen e2, a6, rook d1, queen c7, h3, rook b8, d5, takes, Takes with the bishop, look at that. Bishop b7, takes, queen takes. A typical Sicilian structure, both from a Pirc that turned into a Philidor, Black's d pawn is backward, but solidly defended, and the d5 square is weak, but he hopes to get counterplay via rook f to c8 or b6, b5, which I've identified. I don't know why I failed to identify this as a semi-open file. I mean, I saw it, but I didn't say it. However, White has a way to... and by the way, guys, I'm noticing that when you say something, you kind of react to it. If you just notice it without saying it, whether it's in your mind or out loud, it's not the same. However, White has a way to play for the creation of superior minor piece, explaining the rating spread. Another problem that will prove to be easy for players in the indicated spread to understand and or solve. Exchanging pieces and leaving yourself with a minor piece that's superior to your opponents is a basic but extremely important strategy. So we have bishop to g5. White plays directly, we already read this, and here bishop takes f6 was played. But this is not best. Now, before I keep moving, guys, I'm gonna leave you with this explanation so you can read by yourself. And I'm going to focus, just for a moment, to edit and render the video. Actually, I'm going to interrupt here the video. I'm going to do 2 parts of this, because it's going to take a while for me to fix everything. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, welcome back. How to Reassess Your Chess, episode 10, part 2. For you is the same, for me is part 2. I did a little bit of a break. Okay, so... Bishop takes f6, not best. Did you notice that White's f3 knight had nothing to do with the embattled d5 square from f3? Yes, this is true. It's important to hone your board vision so that you quickly recognize when pieces aren't well placed. One way to tell if a piece isn't carrying its weight is to ask, is my piece helping the rest of the army accomplish the main strategic goal? If it's not doing so, it may very well be a slacker. So, I'm looking for the piece of paper where I wrote down, here it is. So I'm writing down, positional concepts, right? Create outposts for bishop, example, c5 pawn plus d4 bishop. If opponent can't move, solidify before doing anything. You have to make a bishop active, it doesn't happen by itself. Try to make all the pieces work towards the strategic goal. Okay, nice. Correct was knight h2, which instantly brings this knight into the d5 equation. It intends to continue to g4, where after bishop takes f6, getting rid of one enemy knight, it can exchange itself for black's remaining horse, creating the hoped for a great knight versus passive bishop situation. Or it can continue to e3, okay, where it threatens to leap into d5 or f5. It's important that you appreciate how this maneuver turns a once lazy knight into an active participant into the battle for d5. Play after knight h2 may continue h6, takes, knight g4, knight takes, pawn takes, rook c5, knight d5, rook b to c8, c3, bishop to g5, g3. When black has no real counterplay and faces a long, miserable defense due to white's powerful knight and the long-term weakness of d6. To quote international master Elliot Winslow, burn this position into your memory and learn its nuances. It's a bread and butter Sicilian killer. So bishop takes f6 was played, knight takes, knight d5, knight takes, rook takes d5, this was my idea, and now g6. However, f5 would have kept white's advantage to a bare minimum, since all these replies give black far more counterplay than he deserves. For example, c3, rook c5, c4, b5, rook a to d1, rook c6. But okay, in the game g6, which is not good, c3 now, rook c5, rook takes c5, interesting, b takes c5, knight to d2. Okay, if queen takes b2, rook b1 wins the rook, queen c6, knight c4, and the knight was ruled of all creation on c4. The finish was remarkably smooth, since black was reduced to sitting back and waiting and watching white improve his position bit by bit. Queen c2, queen b7, rook b1, queen b3, queen takes, rook takes, king f1. The king moves over to the queen side. Now b4 happens, c takes, pawn takes. Now we're going to create a pass pawn on the queen side. King d7, g4, h takes, king e6. Rook on the other side. f takes, sorry. The superiority of the knight over the bishop stands out in the final position. I must be allergic to something. This is something that I said for 3,000 times, but I don't know. I don't know what that is. Porco Dio. Sorry guys, but... Black resigned because he's completely passive and has to wait as white builds up for the decisive blow. One entertaining possibility, rook c8. If bishop g5, knight g7, followed by knight takes a6, so rook c8, rook h6, king f7, rook h7, king e6, rook g7, g5. The poor bishop has now achieved full tall pawn status. b5, also good is rook a7. A takes, rook b8. b6. If you take with the bishop, rook e7 is mate, as explained here. So rook a8, b7, rook b8, king c4, and black, who's in Zugzwan, has to shed massive amounts of material. Okay, so that was interesting. Okay, so 21. White played bishop d3, and draw was agreed. Was it really equal? Doesn't white enjoy the bishop area in an open position? Play the move to see the answer. So I play the move. What is this? What is this, a puzzle? What? So 3-3 relative symmetry. There is like 3 against, well, no, but there is double pawns on the g file, not a big deal. Bishop d3, the draw was agreed. I mean, I don't know. Perhaps I can try. I don't know. If rook takes, rook there, takes. Knight e4 also can come. If knight d5, well, knight d5 is a little bit annoying, isn't it? You have to play a3, then perhaps knight f4. But I don't know. I will say it's a draw because of knight d5. Let's see. Okay, let's go. Let's go here. So Rajabov, Anand. Knight h3, interesting. e5, knight takes, h takes, queen check, castle, long castle. I guess this is all standard stuff. Okay, so rook h2, a8, bishop d3, yes. White might well have an edge if he could retain his bishops, but there was no way to stop black from using our basic anti-two bishops plan of trading off one of the two bishops. In this case, black would achieve it by playing knight f to d5 followed by bishop f4. Oh, okay, I thought knight b to d5 followed by knight f4, but I'm silly. Note that preventing this plan with c4 failed tactically to bishop takes, when white has to give up a pawn with rook takes, bishop takes f2. Since f takes g3, rook takes d1, wins a whole piece. After bishop d3, play might have continued, knight f d5, knight e4, bishop f4, and white has absolutely nothing. c4, knight d4, Madonna. I don't know what the fuck just happened, but I don't know, I can't speak. It's annoying since it's impossible for the d3 bishop to defend itself while also keeping an eye on both c4 and a2. Explaining the rating spread, the idea of trading off one of the enemy bishops if the opponent has two of them is something a 1400 player can understand and use. Okay. Test 22. Level 2200 on up. That's crazy. So, I think I may know this, but because paradoxically enough, when it says 2200 on up, you have to look for like impossible moves, right? That gives it kind of away. But okay, let's evaluate. 3-3-1, 7, 3-3-1, 7. 3 against 2 on the king side, 2 against 1 on the center, and 3 against 3 on the queen side. Okay. Pawn breaks. Perhaps b4 for them, but I don't know. a4, a3 for us. e4 to open up the bishop. Here we go. Okay, knight against bishop. This knight looks decent, trying to exploit the white light squares. This bishop looks terrible, so we absolutely need to activate it. The rooks are kind of okay for us, quite frankly. So I would say our move is e4. If they take with the pawn, that's a very weak pawn. We can perhaps check, take, and already if they take with the rook, they lose this pawn here. And this is a weakness. If they take with the knight, we can check, and then play rook to b8, or perhaps even a4. But in general, yes, I'm not sure that's the answer, by the way. I'm not sure. Perhaps rook f4 first to be nuanced, and if b3 then e4, somehow it's better. Perhaps you want to prepare it. I don't know. But after b3 they may play this. So I'm just gonna play e4 and learn the solution. Okay, it seems like it's correct. Now I think I'm just gonna play check to really have the monster bishop. Okay. Now I would say that the problem is solved. because it was about that idea. But how do we go exactly about it? Now I don't know. Perhaps a4 is a move. If b3 though, well, that's a weakness. Here we go. So now let's study. Paradoxically, if there was written 1400, 1800, perhaps I wouldn't have solved it. But e4. I don't know why this is like 20 to 200 on up. Of course you have to play e4. Like, of course you have to. Like, what else? Suddenly the bishop isn't a tall pawn anymore. Turning the dormant bishop into a serious force is well worth the sacrifice pawn. This kind of thing and the psychological process involved in actually playing such a move will be explored in part 4, Psychological Manderings. Knight takes c4. Black has been very methodical. First he activates his bishop, then he forces white's king to step to the far right of the board, away from the real fight on the queenside, and finally he begins his assault against white's queenside pawns. I don't know why, but this to me was the easiest so far, which is crazy. But I guess some players find some things more difficult than others, and Seaman is just trying to give some rating. Okay, it's fine. Wang Yue against Rajabov. Okay. d4 knight f6, c4 g6. So some King's Indian shenanigans here. This is a theoretical line. This is all well known. This is all well known in a way. And here we go. Rook a takes b1. Black will be able to generate serious queenside pressure by a4, a5, a4, followed by rook f to b8 to b4, placing heavy heat against both c4 and b2. However, the other battle is between black's tall pawn and white's knight, which will feel quite proud of itself after knight e4. Though going right for the queenside by a4 followed by rook f to b8 would compensate for the inferior minor piece, Black wisely asked, "Why can't I win both battles?" Explaining the rating spread. I would be happy with any player under 2200 that noticed both the minor piece battle and Black's queenside chances. However, actually seeing and having the courage to play Black's best move is quite another matter. It's very instructive but also calls for a lot of vision, courage and confidence. I agree with that. The problem is this is not a real game, this is a puzzle. So I have no problems playing e4. Sorry, Silman. I don't know. I'm happy. Okay, I'm strong, guys, I'm strong, okay? e4. We already read these comments, so knight takes. Okay. Now h4 was played by Wang Ye. This turns out poorly. Better was rook f to c1, rook f to b8, knight to c3, though black has no problems after rook b4, b3, bishop takes, rook to e8. What if a3 though? Rook a1, rook e2. Okay, so h4, g takes, king h2, rook f to b8, b3, takes, rook e2, and black's active pieces give him all the chances. The rest of the game is a picture-perfect case of a bishop schooling a knight. Rook to d1, king improves, tries to trade, attacks the pawn, takes, materials equal, king slightly better, threatening check perhaps, knight here stops. h5, if you take with the knight, rook h1 wins the knight. So f4, bishop f6 check, king moves up, rook pins the knight, king moves, h4, knight goes back, king moves forward, tough position, rook tries to get active, attacks the pawn, steps aside, cuts off the king, g4 check, takes en passant, check, king moves up, if you take the bishop I take your knight, No, actually, if rook takes, I don't take your knight because then rook g5, but I give you check and then I take your knight, okay? So knight e2, pins, defense, bishop e5, king defends but loses a pawn, king f5, check. Now if you take with the rook, I take your knight first and then I win the endgame. So here, bishop saves, takes, and now you're up 2 pawns. Knight's restricted, king improved, check, everything is improved, and he resigned here. Okay, very nice. Okay. So three puzzles are left, or perhaps some more, but it's just about answering questions. Okay. So 3, 2, 3, 3. So they have a pawn up. We have the bishop pair. They have the 2 knights. We have 0 against 1 in the center. That's our curriculum. Great. Wow. What else? What else? How are our bishops? Well, their knights are quite fantastic. Their knights are really good. I really like their knights. What else? I don't know. Let's think. So, are there any threats at the moment? I don't see threats, even though knight f5 I don't really like. I don't really like knight f5. Comes with tempos, a little bit annoying. So what can we do? Well, we can sidestep it, right? We can play rook e2, e8. This is actually perhaps my main candidate move. Knight f6 check. Pawn takes, rook takes. And we lose an exchange. Okay, so rook here is a blunder. So this is actually highly tactical. Knight here is not a threat now, but it could become. So what about perhaps rook to e5? And then there is knight f3 maybe. But then we can go rook d5, hitting this pawn. They push it, let's say. Okay, that's a little bit complicated. We can also go here, but then there is this. So the position is complicated. We go here, 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 here. Here, we are fine. So rook e5 looks okay. I just don't like this much. Rook d5. Rook d7 falls to this. There's also b4 that I'm looking at. Tries to open up the position. Knight f5. Rook e5. It's not bad. It's not bad, actually. I may like this. I may like this. If they take, If they take, I have this. Okay, I'm gonna go with b4. And let's see what happens. Oh, it's correct. Oh my goodness. I mean, of course it's correct. All right. So, okay, so I found this b4 idea, trying to destroy their pawn structure. Now, again, very tactical. How do we continue? Again, I noticed this, but there is this. On this, there is this, right? So that's not good. That's not good. I can play this, though. Oh, I can play queen e5. Now let's look for tactics, because that's highly tactical situation. Knight takes, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, it's fine. Knight here. It's tricky. But I think I can just take here. Maybe. Queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and I should be good. I'm gonna go queen here. If it goes back, I take, they take, and then I take here. So I'm gonna go for this idea. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Oh, it's incorrect. Oh. Bishop c8, black stops knight f5, and after more preparatory moves, intend f6, f5. Depriving the other horse of its central home too. In that case, black's chances would be significantly better than they were in the actual game. Okay. How was this? 1400, 1800. Okay. So we have Yakovenko against Levon Aronian. So this is some classic openings here. Classic situations. I'm going very fast because, you know. Okay, black is a pawn down but has the two bishops. Does this offer sufficient compensation for the material deficit? Probably not. Let's not forget that white's knights are very nicely placed, and if they can remain entrenched in the center, will certainly offer white a significant advantage. In other words, don't get fixated on the pawn and neglect the minor piece battle. Explaining the rating spread. I have a lot of faith in 1400 players, so I'm doubling down on them. After reading all the material on bishop and knights, I fully expect players in that range to have developed a sharp eye for support points. However, if that concept is still a bit vague, then part 5, target consciousness, will add more than a little clarification. b4. Weakening white's grasp of d4, and therefore depriving the knight of a permanent support point. It's critical that the student develop this anti-support point mindset. In the game, black played rook d to e8, and after b4, the d4 knight was a permanent fixture, and after various ups and downs, white eventually managed to win the game. Wow. King h8, knight back, g6, takes, queen d1, f5. The fact that he traded everything is crazy. That's crazy. I'm not understanding much, guys, but I'm just going for it. And the rest was easy, 1-0 in 66 moves. Okay, so b4. Now c4, and here bishop to c8. Black stops knight f5, and after more preparatory moves, instead f6, f5, depriving the other horse of its central home too. In that case, black's chances would be significantly better than they were in the actual game. Okay, very nice. And it was Aronian with the black pieces, so that's crazy. Problem 24. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So material is equal. We have symmetry on the queen side, 1 against 2 in the center, and 3 against 2 on the king side. We have more space in the center and on the queen side. Minor pieces. Pawn breaks, I guess, weak squares. I should look at all these. So there is a semi-open E file, semi-open F file, weak squares, weak squares. We have E6 square, which we would really love to enter somehow. That would be lovely. They have which squares? I don't know. They have C5 perhaps, but not really. E3 can be weak, I guess. So, what else can we say here? Let's compare the minor pieces. The knight on C3 has an important role. It's not crazy, but it has an important role. The E4 square is contended. And what else? The bishop on G7 is not super active for them, but it has the important purpose of defending the dark squares, I guess. So our knight on C3, the knight on C6 is applying some pressure. He's a decent knight. The rooks, I would say our rooks are a little bit better. They're already connected. The queen, our queen is perhaps a little bit better, creating a battery. So we have slightly better pieces and more space. Can we take advantage of that? Well, I'm not sure. A move that comes to my mind is bishop G5. Because bishop G5 makes it a little bit hard for them to like take on E4. Even though they probably can do it and just move the queen. Another move we can play is G4. But okay, here I don't know what to do. Here I don't know what to do. I really don't know what the plan would be. Bishop H6 to trade off their dark square bishop, maybe. Bishop takes F5, G takes F5. Bishop G5 trying to go for superior. Maybe that's no, there's no way they can just move it. Maybe bishop takes pawn takes F4. No, there's no way. No. I really don't know. This is tough. This is difficult. We can perhaps play G4, and after, I don't know, bishop takes, but there's also knight takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, then we play G5, and their bishop's dead, and we can always play for C5 on the queen side, while their bishop is completely dead. That's actually an idea. But I really have no idea. Okay, let's try to think. What's the imbalances here? The 3 against 2 on the queen, on the king side. Bishop H6 is a move. But what's going on? It's so complicated, this position. Perhaps we want to play knight against good bishop. Perhaps retreating the bishop is best. Or bishop G5. Bishop G5 really may make some sense. With the idea of taking the knight, then retreating the bishop and exchanging it for the knight. But they can just leave the bishop there. But we can play G5 then? I don't know. I really don't know, and it's driving me crazy. Bishop g5, we are trying to go for the superior knight, but bishop g5, it works if they play bishop takes. Otherwise it doesn't work. But we can go g4, I guess. I don't know, guys, I don't know what to do. Minor pieces, and this is supposed to be easy. I really don't know. Like, what if they play knight takes? Well, it's so difficult, this one here. I don't know why it's so difficult. I'm in a crisis here. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna play bishop g5, trying to trade off that knight. I don't care. It's somehow correct, and of course taking is like terrible. Like, why would you ever take? I don't know. But on knight takes, there actually is knight takes, and on bishop takes, queen takes. So knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, bishop takes, they're up a piece. So I think I should take this first. So knight takes, materials equal, knight takes, they win a piece, we take their queen, they take our queen. Yeah, no, I have to take it first. Yeah, and now knight takes. Yeah. Okay, but what about the alternatives? I mean, so bishop g5, bishop takes, which is crazy. Why would you do that? Just do nothing. Just move the queen. Why wouldn't you just move the queen? Yeah, knight takes, knight takes. Yeah, this is obvious, right? But I was concerned about alternatives. I mean, I solved it, great, but... There is a battle ranging for the e4 square, which I've identified. White finds a way to win that fight and also to give himself a superior minor piece. Explaining the rating spread. It's no secret that this section is all about bishops and knights and all the things that make them tick, so this example's basic battle for a square should be within everyone's reach. Yeah, but to me that was the difficult one. I don't know, bro, it's weird. Bishop g5, bishop takes. This is crazy. This is crazy. Bishop takes, rook takes, knight takes. Now, rook f4 was tried, king to b1, prophylaxis. Queen d7, c5, initiating queenside play. Black now has serious problems, he has less central space. White will generate strong queenside pressure, and black's usual kingside counterplay is nowhere to be found. All this, plus the enormous superiority of the knight, leaves the second player in bad shape. Takes, queen f5, knight e4, not allowing rook to d4, bishop to f8, queen to e2, bishop d6, rook to d3, rook f8, rook to c1, h6, a3. White takes a moment to tend to his king. You never know when a safety square for his majesty will be welcome. Now black faces a dilemma. He can play passively, hang on and hope for the best. Such a strategy rarely meets a happy end. Or he can try for kingside counterplay via h6, h5, and g5, g4. However, this will weaken his own king position and could easily lead to the old cure is worse than the disease situation. Black decides to go down swinging. h3, h5, g4. As if minor piece and queenside supremacy weren't enough, white now takes over on the kingside. By fixing black's pawn on g5, his queen will be forced to babysit it for a long time to come. H takes. This mistake opens the H file and allows white to grab that too. Nevertheless, the superior queen g6 also left black with bleak prospects. White will then have to choose between going for the throat with h takes g4 or keeping everything tight and under control while simultaneously increasing the pressure by king a to h4, rook to b3, b6, rook to c6. Going for the throat will be g takes h5, queen takes h5, rook g1, threatening rook takes g5 check, rook takes g5 anyways, and it's GG. So h takes g4, h takes g4, queen g6, rook h1, king g7, rook h5. The rest couldn't have given black any pleasure. Bishop e7, bishop c3, bishop to d8, of course, overworked pieces, takes, queen h2, threatening queen h5, rook takes e4, wow. If rook takes f3, then check, king g7, knight g5, threatening some sort of terrible things. Well, the rook first. Rook f1, king here, check, GG. So rook takes c4, queen h5, check, check, takes. King a2, white's 25th move is vindicated, 25th. Bishop d4 and 1-0 without waiting for the reply. d6, rook f2, queen takes b2. Would have left black feeling embarrassed for playing on, because rook takes, queen takes, bishop takes, king takes is a winning endgame here. King here, pawn here, king here, pawn here, king here, pawn here, king here, pawn here. Yeah. See in the chapter, view. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 more tests, but only one is to play moves, so let's see. Sorry, this is not how it's done. I didn't read anything, but I made sure to escape. 26, 25 here, you. Okay, black to move, assess the position. Wow, okay. So 2 pawns, 4 pawns, we have double pawns, open a file. Their pieces are just much better than ours. So that's just my opinion. So the black's better to me. Unless white, black to move? No, black's better. E4? No, E4 perhaps is terrible. I don't know. I feel like black's better somehow. No? Queen d6, bishop f3 though. Queen g7. Sorry, queen d7. But e4 looks really interesting, but e4 there's bishop d2, but then queen c2. It's so difficult. Perhaps rook f to d8. Rook f to d8. Rook f to d8. Rook f to d8. Rook d1. Queen c6. But then there is rook takes d8. Rook takes d8. Bishop f3. Wow. Why does it look like black's so much better? It really fits like that. But yeah, perhaps e4 with the idea of bringing a knight to d3. I like that. Yeah, I like e4. I like e4, knight d7, knight e5, knight d3. Or knight d7, knight c5, even better. Knight to d3. I like it, yeah. I like black e4. Yeah. Yeah, let's go. Maybe I'm insane. d4, knight f6, knight f3, all these things are irrelevant. I mean, they're not irrelevant, but you know. White has two bishops versus black's bishop and knight. However, at the moment, black's bishop is far stronger than either white bishop. It controls of the a8, h1 diagonal is terrifying, and the knight also has far more possibilities than the enemy bishop. It can leap to e4, d5, or even to c5 via d7, yeah. Why are the white minor pieces so ineffective? The answer is simple. The c1 bishop isn't developed and can't seem to find a diagonal to call its own. Explaining the rating spread. I think some players would be misled into favoring white by his pressure against a7 down the a file and his two bishops. Hopefully this problem will make you a bit more sympathetic towards knights. The inability of the c1 bishop to show its stuff leaves black with a clear advantage. Now let's make a slight adjustment in the position. Put white's pawn on e4, his pawn on f3, and his dark square bishop on e3. Suddenly, black, yeah, let's assume this pawn on f2 is not here. Suddenly, black's advantage is gone, and white is the one who possesses a significant plus. Everything has changed. The knight can no longer rest on e4 or d5. And the b7 bishop diagonal has now been completely shut down. Let's not forget white's problem dark square bishop. It's still a problem, but a problem for black. Sitting proudly on e3, it radiates power along two diagonals, g1, a7 and c1, h6. As you can see, simply owning two bishops and expecting them to win the game for you shows a serious misconception. All the position's details need to be considered before making any kind of assessment. Returning back to the position in the actual game, black needs to make sure the c1 bishop remains miserable. And of course, he needs to make sure white can't ever reach this fantasy situation mentioned above. Rook f2 d8, so simple and so strong, prevents the bishop from developing. A rook takes the open file and prevents bishop d2. Rook to e1. b4, then queen to c2 is annoying. For example, bishop b5, let's say. If bishop a6, bishop takes queen takes rook d1. Whoa. Rook takes queen f1, queen c2, and white is in bad shape. After both h3, h6, king h2, rook c8, and e4, queen takes, bishop here, knight d5, bishop here, and f6. So it either white loses material and develop the bishop, but then it does nothing, or it doesn't develop the bishop. So bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, queen to g6 threatening mate, f3, e4, not following the dream e3, e4, f4, rook to d3, queen a2, rook c8, with a winning game. So rook to e1, and now a5. This is a very important and very effective move. Now the b3 pawn is fixed in place, since b4 loses immediately to a takes b4. a7 is no longer under any pressure, and queen b4 is permanently off the table. e4, sacrificing a pawn to free the c1 bishop. Not an ideal solution, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to find a useful move. f3, hoping against hope that he'll be allowed to follow up with e4 and b3, but there is e4, telling white the dreams rarely come true. f4, queen to c2, and now there are some possibilities. Queen e7, on bishop f1, rook d1 is immediately decisive. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. On queen a4, knight d5, bishop d1, queen c7, queen takes knight b4, queen c4, rook to c8, queen takes c7, on queen e2, queen d6, queen takes c7, rook takes c7 are both quite green for white. Again, it all comes down to this bishop that cannot really be developed. If rook here, you lose the bishop. Okay, so let's go back to the very first line here. Queen c2, now there is this, queen e5, queen takes e2, wow, rook d1, check, that's crazy, king g3, knight takes, rook c8, whoa, rook d2, rook to g1. White, who is still in a straitjacket, will soon lose material or find himself in a mating net. So, okay, e4, bishop takes, bishop g5, h3, rook here, queen b7, bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop f1, rook d4. White has managed to develop his pieces and even tear apart the enemy king's pawn cover. Unfortunately, black is a solid pawn ahead. His king is far safer than one might suppose, and his pieces are on good central squares. White, who is quite desperate, tries to create kingside threats, but it doesn't lead to anything at all. The finish was b4, rook takes, rook to c4, rook takes, bishop takes, king g7, h4, bishop g6, queen to g3, h5, rook to d1, queen c7, bishop here, king h7, queen f3, rook d8. I guess queen takes f3 runs into rook takes, bishop takes, queen c1 perhaps. So rook e1, rook d6, b3, queen c5, and it was over. Okay. Very complicated. I start to be tired. I don't really understand anything. Today I studied what? Hour 3 of chess studying. Okay, black to move, assess the position. 1400, 2200, what? That's crazy. So, chew4, symmetrical pawn structure. We have more space on the queen side. Pawn breaks are like f4, and for them f5, I guess. Weak squares, d5. For us, d4 and c4. We have the bishop pair. They have a stranded knight on h5. That's very, very good. I don't like their knight at all. What about knight c4 as a move? Knight takes, rook takes, rook takes. Bishop takes, that's very good. Yeah, knight c4 looks fantastic. But then bishop to a6 to trade off one of the light square bishops. Knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes. No, but we have knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, bishop takes, and then rook takes. So I think a move may be a4 here to play b5 and kill their bishop, so that bishop a6 is not a thing. So I think white is better, but we have to play a4 to kill their bishop. This is my opinion. So, okay, This position is pleasant for white thanks to her pair of bishops. So this is Irina Crash against Yuha Xu. Okay, her pair of bishops and the misplaced knight on h5, which is both of these things I've identified. Neither side has any serious weakness though, so there's no need for over-optimism from white side or panic from black's. In general, there are two ways for the inferior side, in this case black, to play in such situations. One is to accept that you're worse and just improve your game bit by bit in an effort to steer the position to eventually equality and a draw. The other is to seek tactical chances, remembering that you can't force such things since over-aggressive moves tend to create self-inflicted weaknesses and can make things worse. In the present case, black should carefully weigh both. The automatic go-for-it idea, f5, trying to get the b7 bishop into the action, but rook takes, bishop h3, pins the pawn, knight f6, rook to e1, leaves black under serious pressure, explaining the rating spread. Assessments should all be in the favorable to white because of her two bishops box, but after that there's a lot of nuance and wiggle room. Okay. And is black to move, so my idea of playing a4 is a little bit... Alright, so g5, the idea is to crack e4 with g5, g4. However, the poor placement of the h5 knight and the fear that a further opening up of the position will favor the bishops, which it usually does, makes the push of the g-pawn rather dubious. Again, unless you are sure that an aggressive committal idea will bear fruit, don't embark on an adventure that will only add to your defensive chore by creating new weaknesses in your own camp. Since f5 didn't get the job done, black should tighten up her position first. So, I'm going to write this down. Unless you are sure that an aggressive committal idea will work, bear fruit, okay? Don't embark on an adventure that will only add to your defensive chore by creating new weaknesses in your own camp. In your own camp. Okay, since f5 didn't get the job done, black should tighten up her position first. Perhaps a chance for f7, f5 will appear later, perhaps not, but there's no shame in being realistic and accepting that the opponent's two bishops are better than your bishop and knight. Once you make this sober determination, you should seek the usual anti-bishop pair ideas. Try to exchange one of the bishops, get all your pieces into play, and create a solid wall that's devoid of weak points. For example, knight f6, don't allow your knight to rot away on the side of the board. Rook takes c8, even though a4, look at that, a4, bro. So rook takes c8, rook c1, rook takes c1, queen takes c1, knight f to e8 with a solid but slightly inferior game. Okay, you might be scared to death if you were facing Kramnik here, but do you really believe that your non-Kramnik opponent has the technique to eviscerate such a position? After queen to c3, queen to c2 will stop any f5 nonsense. White's better, so why should she allow things to get out of control? Queen c3, f5. Black has the usual array of hold-on tight moves, but this move now seems rather interesting. Bishop h3, queen f6, queen b3, king f8, and now Who knows what might happen? Crazy position. In the actual game, black lashes out. Where is the actual game? So g5, knight c4. Bro, these comments are infinite. Okay. Knight c4, knight takes c4. Rook takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop c4. This is the line I saw. And I assess this as better for white. Queen f6, bishop back to the fence, rook d7, queen b3. A nice move that threatens queen a4, simultaneously hitting d7 and a7. a6, b5. Excellent play by Miss Crush. Chess player names don't get any better than Crush. Well, there is that guy that's called Siwa Better Move or something. There is a guy called Siwa Better Move. Like literally, like a grandmaster from some weird place. Like, dude. By freezing the b6 pawn, it becomes a diagonal casualty. How can black guard it after bishop f2? Followed by queen e3. So a5, rook d1, rook d6, bishop f2. g4. At this point, black has every right to panic. F takes, knight back, rook takes, queen g6, bishop here, knight e6, queen takes b6, bishop takes, bishop back, and now you have a passed pawn on b5. Knight g5, anything but this. What's so wrong with that? Check and taking. The resulting endgame offers black no hope at all. The rest of the game was more execution than battle. Queen takes. Oh, he offered the trade of queens. Oh. b6, bishop here, bishop there, preparing king f2, bishop here, knight e6, here. Yeah, that's pretty much over. Now go here, takes, bishop back, you push 2 pawns, and now you go collect the other pawn, and it's GG. Okay. Test 27, let's see. Assess the position. Oh my goodness. What's going on here? What the hell? Oh my god. So assess the position. You talk about easy things. So 2, 3, 4. So 2, 3, 4. Okay, so pawns are equal. So materials equal. We have a 2 against 1 in the center, 2 against 3. They have worse pawn structure. Their bishop is a horrible bishop. However, something tells me the situation is perhaps more concrete than that. Something tells me that knight c7, knight takes c6 is best, but I don't know. Because their bishop is a tall pawn, but is defending important squares. So, and our pieces are better. That knight on f6, though, may leap into e4. So f3 may also be a thing. No, but knight e4, we can just go king e2 and then f3 later. So, a move that comes to mind is knight c7, rook a to g8, knight takes e6, king takes e6 forced, and then rook a to g1, and it feels like we are better, much better. So I think white's better. I think white's clearly better here. And even a move like rook a to c1 looks fantastic. So yeah, white's better. White's better. White's clearly better here, in my opinion. Unless I'm insane. Which I could be. Carlsen Anand. Don't tell me this is a Carlsen Anand classic. d4, d5, c4, c6. Oh my, what the hell? Oh my god. What's going on here? Bishop e6. With the superior pawn structure and active bishop versus tall pawn, white has a small but annoying plus. Okay. Explaining the rating spread. A basic assessment is pretty straightforward, does the 1400 level citation, deciding that exchanging white's knight for black's poor bishop is the way to go, which is what I said, isn't straightforward at all, leading us to the 2200 level citation. Dude, second time that I solved 2200 puzzle, let's go. Positional puzzle, because tactical puzzles are relatively easy, but positional puzzle is good. Knight c7, this is what I would have played, that's crazy. A surprise, but it fits it nicely with our overview of bishops. Carlsen realizes that the enemy bishop, though ugly, is actually a good defensive piece, yes! In other words, it's inactive but useful. Due to this, he exchanges the bishop for the knight, which will force the knight to defend f5. Rook h2 g8, knight takes, king takes. Okay, and here my line was rook a to g1, but I guess this is also a thing. Knight takes g8. The knight is heading to e7, where it will defend both d5 and f5. On rook takes g8, oh, rook c1 now. Rook g2, king here, very simple. Rook h2 was a more active defensive possibility with good chances to hold the draw. Oh, and this is Anand. Bro, that's crazy. King e2, knight e7, defends everything. King f3. The king improves its position and, after some preparation, intends to take up residence on f4, where it will work with the bishop in pressuring f5. Rook c8, a4, rook c7, a5, h6, h4. White is making spatial gains on both wings and is slowly but surely improving the positions of its pieces and pawns. The advance of white's a-pawn means that a7, a6 will fix black's queenside pawns on light squares. This makes them vulnerable in the bishop versus knight endgame that can easily occur. If black tries b7, b6, this is so instructive, bro. This is so instructive. Holy shit. If black tries, okay. If black tries b7, b6 instead, at some point, white can capture and use the a file for bothersome rook penetration. Note that black's rook can't do anything on the c file because the bishop covers c4 and c2, while the b2 pawn covers c3. White's h-pawn will advance to h5, where it keeps the knight out of g6. That allows white king to go to f4 without fearing a knight check. Once all this is done, white will improve the position of his rook, mixing threats of taking the c and g files with attacking possibilities against the h6 pawn. I should add that all of this is very advanced. Instead of feeling deflated by the complexity of it all, I implore you to watch for two things. No, I feel like inspired, like tremendously. This is awesome. I love this. Keep your eyes on the bishop and how it constantly proves itself to be far more flexible than the knight. Watch how white makes sure all of his pieces are ideally placed. You're looking to absorb patterns here, not to understand reams of analysis or grandmaster level maneuvering. Exactly. Let's go, Siemens the GOAT. So king f6, h5, again, not allowing knight g6. Knight c8, again, what happened on king g5? I don't know, something happens. But knight back, king f4, knight d6, you have to kind of do that. Rook g1, a6 was also interesting. So rook g1, rook c8, f3, very useful. e4 is taken away from the knight, anti-knight strategy, and e3, e4 becomes a possibility at the right time. Note that white has no interest in b2, b3, since, aside from being unnecessary, knight c4 will hang the f5 pawn, with an attack on the rook, we should add. It would block the bishop access to a4, and a4, okay. And give the enemy rook access to c3. After f3, a near Zugzwang position has occurred. If black moves his rook off the c file, white will claim it by rook c1. If black plays b6, then a takes, rook a1, gives white the a file. If black moves the king to e7, then moves such as bishop takes f5 or rook g7 or king e5 all become possible. If rook c7, then rook g8. And finally, if king to e6, as played in the game, that rook g7 adds to black's holes. This means that, like it or not, a6, even though it fixes the queenside pawns on light squares, needs to be given a shot, since white can't maintain the Zugzwang. In that case, rook g2, rook c1 gives black counterplay, b3, rook c3 favors black, and bishop b1, king to e6 holds, since rook g7 now allows rook c1 with a key tempo on the bishop. Okay, again, this is very complex grandmaster analysis. We just keep going. So f3 was played, now king e6. As pointed out in the note to white's 29th move, a6 was correct. Now rook g7, and here there is no tempo to be gained. And here rook h7, rook takes h6 is important. Rook h8, else white will win the h-pawn via rook h7, and now bishop to c2. The bishop shows its stuff. Since the f5 pawn is well defended, the bishop moves to b3, where it will torture d5. That's crazy. So rook c8, bishop b3, rook h8, rook g1, with the idea rook c1, rook c8, rook g7, rook h8, rook g2, rook c8, rook g1. White has been using Zugzwang motifs to improve his position with gain of time. Black's problem is that he can't give white the c-file, but he also can't play a move like rook c7, since that will drop h6 to rook g7, h7. This means black is left going back and forth, hoping white can find a decisive breakthrough. Knight e8. On knight to c4, bishop takes c4, whoa, or e4 would both pose black serious problems. The move black played allows white to break with e3, e4, whether or not that wins is another matter. However, he wasn't able to stem the tide any longer. For example, a6 will lead to another Zugzwang, rook g7, threatening rook h7, rook h8, rook g2, threatening rook c2, rook c8, rook g1, and black has to either give up the c-file or move the knight and allow e3, e4 once again. So yeah, after a6 there's basically a piece triangulation, allow me this terminology, that recreates the Zugzwang. That's crazy. So knight e8, e4, avoiding the catastrophic rook g8, knight f6, rook takes c8, knight takes h5. Oh, that's nice. So e4, f takes, and you can, this is spin now. So now there is knight f6, and e5, knight e4. The game raged on for quite a while. Both sides made some serious leaps, but ultimately black went down in defeat. I'll give the rest without commentary, but the battle between the bishop and knight continues until one of the pieces finally disappears. Not knight takes h5, king e3, when the knight is trapped on h5, okay? So king to e3. Yeah, this had to be noted. King to e3, b6, a takes b6, a takes b6, king d3, knight check, king here, f6, rook g6, rook c1, rook takes, rook h1, bishop here, check, knight check, knight here, a little bit annoying, rook takes, king e7, bishop here, check, takes, attacks, takes, rook h4, pushes this pawn, threatens to promote if rook takes h7, rook b7, goes here, king to b2, king d2. This is some crazy maneuvering right there. And now he resigned. Crazy. Test 28, and that's the last test. Let's see. Wow. Level 1400, 1800. Whose minor piece is better, and how much better? How should white play? Wow, that's some crazy moves. Whose minor piece is better? That's a great question. Well, so All of my pawns are on dark squares, the far away one, so that's good. I have a knight, they have a bishop. I will say that the knight is better, because the knight can look at both the squares. Now, how do I activate this knight, though? A move that I consider, believe it or not, is like knight takes b4. But I guess a3 is more on point. a3, b takes a3, knight takes a3. But even here is not easy to activate, but I guess queen c3 then can be played. And then eventually we can play knight c2, knight d4, and even b4 maybe, and bring the king forward, you know? And transpose to one of those positions that we saw with king c5, king d6. Yeah, we can transpose to those example positions. So how white should play? I will say that he needs to activate this knight. Are there ways to do it without sacrificing crazy amount of materials? I'm gonna play a3. I have a feeling this is too simplistic and it's like wrong, but let's go. Here we go. Now I will play knight takes, okay? And now personally, I will play queen to c3 to try to trade the queens and go to a winning endgame here. Quite frankly, you know, I will really try to do that. Let's go. Do we go for it? Alternative. No. All right. So I'm such a silly hat sometimes. What else rather than this? Knight here. Knight here perhaps is a super advanced meta move. If you go here, I force the trade of the queens, and if you go back, I win a tempo and I go queen c3. That's crazy. Or knight here, knight here. Ah, that's also interesting. Knight here, knight here, knight here. All right. Knight c2, no. I knew it. And now queen here, finally, yeah. Yeah, that was correct, okay. All right. So, level 1400, 1800, whose minor piece is better? a3. We are looking at a case of total knight domination, yeah. White wants to get the c3 square. B takes, knight takes, king e8, knight c2, improving the knight. King c8, queen c3. Exchanging queens allows the white king to safely advance and strive for deep penetration into the enemy position. White's king and dominant knight did the rest, yeah, of course. All right. Dominguez Perez linear against Hikaru Nakamura. Okay. This is something, I guess. This was a game of chess, as you can see. The chess is chessing. What's going on here? c5 takes. I guess that queen g5 was threatened, so. And now if you play queen g5, queen takes c2 and queen b2, so you have to take. And now the queen defends. Maybe this is theory, I don't know. Seems a little bit artificial, but we are talking about Perez and Nakamura, so these guys are crazy. Here we go. That's some crazy shenanigan. Here we go, king e8. Bearing some strange tactical problem, this kind of structure, combined with this specific minor piece battle, is almost always won for the knight in both middle games and endgames. There are several reasons why black's game is so miserable. First of all, the bishop will be purely defensive since white's pawns will eventually all be on dark squares, meaning that the bishop can't ever attack them. White's enormous kingside space advantage chokes both the black bishop and king. Then, this specific pawn structure allows a particular tactical idea, looked at in the notes, that will always torture black from beginning to end. White king, sorry, I have to click here perhaps. Okay. White's king can step on a dark square, and be immune from the bishop, but black's king can always be kicked out by the nimble knight. All in all, we are looking at a case of total knight domination, explaining the rating spread. I'm hoping everyone appreciated the superiority of the knight. The real problem was in determining just how much better the knight really is. So a3, winning, I would have said winning. a3, first off the agenda is to clear always the b4 pawn. This in turn gives white access to c3, while also preparing a timely b3, b4 push. Takes, and by the way, here you are attacking b4 3,000 times, so you are forced to take. King d8, knight back, king c8, queen c3. Exchanging queens allow the white king to safely advance and strive for deep penetration into the enemy position. King b7, takes, king c3. b4. White's king wants to move forward, and the a5 pawn was preventing this. Thus, the exchange, which will ultimately give white king access to b4, makes good sense. a4. Everything loses. Most logical move seems to be a takes b4 check or bishop b5. Both amount to the same thing, but white's king and knight combine to push black's pieces back and allow a decisive penetration into the heart of black's position. Bishop b5 could have been a thing, but now knight d4, bishop back. What about taking? What? Oh, you know what? If a takes b4, king takes b4, bishop takes d3, there is knight takes e6. And after f takes e6, f6. That's why bishop e8 has to be played, because here you're threatening knight takes e6. Wow. Knight b3, which attacks the pawn. If you play a4, knight c5 will win the pawn. So takes, bishop b5, knight here, threatening knight takes e6 again, bishop back, d4. Black's king must give ground since the bishop move allows tactics on e6. So king c6, king a5, bishop d7. Now if you play knight takes, bishop takes, and black wins. So king a6, now check. Bishop e8 loses quickly to knight b7, allowing knight d7. King a7, king c7, king a8, bishop d7, knight a6 check. Once again the knight lays down the law. The king must accept the game-losing retreat. King to c8. If you play king b6, there's king b8, and after king takes a6, king here, bishop here, king b5, king here, king c4, king takes d4, king takes e6, it's over. So after king c8, king a7, now king to d8, if bishop c6, king b6, bishop back, knight here, which threatens knight takes e6, bishop there, knight here, with knight d6 to follow. So after king a7, king d8, now knight to c5, bishop to c8, on king c7, knight b7, and the knight once again lands on d6, and after bishop to c8, king to b6, bishop d7, knight b7 check, knight d6 check, king to c7, bishop to a4, king to d8, bishop to c6, knight to c8, bishop a4, knight to b6, bishop b5, knight d7 check, and finally the king has to go away with king g8. If bishop takes d7, king takes, and here it's just completely over. King g8, knight here, king here, bishop here. And here you just have to find a way to attack f7. Threatens both the bishop and knight takes c6, sure. So bishop here, knight b7, and knight d6 picks up f7 and end the game. It's worth going over these analyses again and again. No, you don't have to memorize anything, but I do want you to see how perky the knight is and how it has the ability to attack pawns from a number of angles and also kick black's king out of the white's king's way. This is true. This is true, very, very useful. So a4, everything loses, but let's see this. Knight d4. Black's king can't move to b5, and black's bishop needs to constantly prevent knight takes e6. King a6, king to b2, king b6, king a3, bishop e8, knight to e2, going knight c3, bishop b5, attacks a pawn, knight c3, and now d4 was played. More knight tactics follow. If bishop d3, knight takes d5, king b5, because on king c6, knight e7, king b5, knight c8, followed by knight e6, and on king b5, knight c7, king c4, knight takes c6. Now, after bishop takes d3, knight takes d5, if you take, I play e6, and there's no way to stop this, and if you take, I push and I win. So d4, this is actually huge, the fact that you can even take the first pawn and go with the other two, that's crazy. So d4, knight here, bishop takes, knight here, threatening knight takes e6, bishop to c4 was played, on bishop b5, of course, knight takes e6, clear, so bishop c4 was tried, but now king takes, obviously, bishop d5, knight e2, check, again, threatening 3,000 things, so bishop e8 is the only move. Now the king moves forward, bishop b5, moves, goes here. Now knight to e2. Bishop to c6, the knight gets to do the honors after king b5. Knight c3, knight here. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. When knight e6 ends things quickly, you gotta be quick. Bishop c6, knight here. Bishop here, the pawns pushed. There was no reason to continue since bishop f3, king here, bishop here, king here, bishop f3, knight check. Will be business as usual for the king and knight. That's crazy. Boom, congratulations, hard work pays off. You finished learning the chapter. Pat yourself on the shoulder, guys, because, you know, this was great. We did it. We did it. Part 1 and part 2 are both done. So I'm gonna stop here for this video here. Let me position myself here. What a journey. In the next video, which I'm about to record very quickly, I think I'm gonna have dinner, then I'm gonna record the next video. I'm gonna study like 6 hours of chess today. We are gonna go over part 3, rooks, files, ranks, and targets. When I evaluate, I notice that I don't really pay attention to like semi-open files and open files, and also tactics involving open files escape my attention for me and my opponent. So this is going to be a revolutionizing chapter for me. And then, after part 3 is done, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it all today, probably not, but after part 3 is done, we're going to move over to part 4. Material, fear of giving up or taking material. Part 4 is a lot about psychology, but like the good one, you know, like biases, which is crucial to improve at anything. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see you for part 3, exploring the rook movements. Enjoy your chess.